What if you knew right in this second that you've been prepping the wrong way all this time, and it will almost certainly guarantee that you'll lose all your food, water, ammo, gold, and your loved ones killed? You would probably panic and break the bank to get to a $500 a seat seminar and believe those so-called survival gurus know what they're talking about. But unfortunately, that could be the biggest mistake of your life, costing you more than you've ever imagined. And in the next few moments, you will be shocked, as I was, to discover that the common yet criminally ineffective techniques found out there will help you starve, end up in a FEMA camp, broke, in jail, or dead. Even though it's not your fault, you didn't know better. How could you when no one told you that having a tall fence around the house screams valuable things inside, especially during a disaster? Or that the basement is the first place looters and the government look for stockpiles, or focusing too much on food and ammo and not enough on water is a death sentence. I was guilty of some of these mistakes and plenty more, but that was before I discovered that the most effective techniques are the most counterintuitive ones and don't come from books, but from 21st century collapsed countries, war zones, and lawless states where social chaos is daily life. And where not having money or time to prepare doesn't stop real-world preppers from surviving and thriving. These are men that use their wit, cleverness, and experience to create survival techniques that tackle the unexpected developments of a modern-day disaster. And I can understand that you're skeptical about what I'm saying. I would be too, if it wasn't for a near-death experience that turned everything I knew about surviving on its head. Even though I was a U.S. Army officer for over 25 years. My name is Scott Rogers, and I've been a prepper for the better part of a decade. Like you and other like-minded patriots, I understand that we live in troubling times, and there are plenty of ways for the you-know-what to hit the industrial-sized fan. ISIS terrorists operating on U.S. soil, economic collapse looms over America, anarchy and mayhem are everywhere, gun confiscation and martial law become a reality, genetically engineered superviruses are on the loose, devastating natural disasters are on the rise all across the nation, our once great infrastructure crumbles to the ground. Any one of these disasters can become a reality tomorrow, and that's why you need to know how to make it out alive, no matter how bad things get. To know secret ways to preserve food and medicine without a refrigerator, to be able to send mobs of hungry looters running, even if you run out of bullets. To cook a warm meal for your loved ones without drawing unwanted attention. And be prepared to thrive and strive even if a disaster drags on for months on end. I don't know about you, but it will be a cold day in hell when I trust the government to come to my rescue. Like Ronald Reagan once said, the 10 most terrifying words you'll ever hear are, "I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you." That's why I know that if I don't do everything in my power to ensure my loved ones survive during the next big disaster, no one will. And I thought I had obtained that power until 2.5 years ago, when I saw a seasoned prepper thrown out of his home like a rag doll, betrayed by his own prepping during an outburst of social chaos, and was brutally bludgeoned to death by a vicious mob. And I'll tell you all about an unlikely prepper, a 65-year-old arthritis-riddled Venezuelan whose story will make you question everything you know about SHTF preparedness and will pull the curtain back on a few simple, effective, battle-tested techniques that are guaranteed to keep you well-fed and protected, even when vicious gangs are beating up old people and deranged psychopaths are killing others just for fun. I'll hand over all these secrets and much more, but first, let me tell you about my brush with death. I was in Venezuela when it all went wrong and witnessed what looked like the rehearsal for what will come to America in the near future. It was February 9th, 2014, when I landed in Caracas, Venezuela, to visit my brother David. He'd been teaching English to a local high school for a little over 7 years. I made it over to his house in a nice, quiet neighborhood, not so different from my own. But just 2 days later, our warm family reunion turned into a fight for survival Venezuela was in the midst of a deep economic, political, and humanitarian crisis. The chronic shortage of basic goods like food, water, and even toilet paper made life a living nightmare. But when Socialist President Nicolas Maduro announced new, catastrophic economic policies, that flung the country further into chaos. All hell broke loose as violent mobs of looters gradually took over the capital. Power outages crippled many neighborhoods, including my brother's. Hundreds of thousands of people swarmed into the streets in Caracas. We could hear gunshots outside and the roaring riots in the streets. That same night, while the mobs were going mad outside, we heard a frantic knocking on David's door. It was Andreas, his neighbor. "Guys, it's not safe for you here. Come to my house. I have plenty of supplies," he said. I couldn't argue that, since David wasn't into prepping and barely had any supplies in the house. Andreas' house looked like that of a regular American prepper, with a tall 8-foot fence surrounding it, a basement stocked to the brim with food, water, and ammo. He also carried a 9mm with him at all times and had an AK-47 and AR-15 in his safe room. Like many of the preppers back home, Andreas was aware of the dangerous times he lived in and went to great lengths to make sure he was prepared for anything. For the first time in days, we felt safe. Little did we know that this almost cost us our lives. As madness spread throughout the city, it reached our neighborhood. David and I had just finished lighting a cooking fire at the back of the house when we heard frantic shouting outside the house. In mere moments, we saw a whole flood of looters jump the wall and swarm the compound. Andreas managed to let loose 2 gunshots before the horde of hungry, crazed looters got to him. They threw him down to the ground and started to stomp on his face, while others used crude planks of wood with nails in them to beat him mercilessly. Blood ran out into the streets, and all we could hear was Andreas' screams of pain and agony as those lunatics snuffed out his life. I felt completely helpless and ashamed that I couldn't do anything to help this man. But I also quickly realized that we were next on the menu if we couldn't get away. To this day, I believe that it was God's hand that led us to safety. As we stood in the dark corner of the compound, watching as the looters continued to ransack the house, I saw a small doorway against the far back wall. David and I ran to it immediately and started to desperately